Thanks for having me. I will be discussing 5 equity challenges and possible solutions in long COVID clinical trials. So long COVID disproportionately impacts marginalized populations, and that's because of structural racism that makes marginalized and historically disenfranchised populations at higher risk of COVID infections and thus of long COVID. And we see this in the data. The prevalence of long COVID is higher among non-white people and people without a college degree and LGBTQ people. And we also know that socially disadvantaged populations are 2.5 times more likely to report long COVID. Yet, long COVID biomedical research has an equity issue. And inequity in long COVID research is a major barrier to finding effective treatments. Pervasive inequity biases data, and biased data leads to analytical issues. For example, trial results that cannot be generalized beyond the sample population. In addressing these disparities in research participation, will ensure the data collected reflects the experiences of the most impacted populations. So the channels and possible solutions that we're going to discuss will be demographic and regional bias, demographic and regional bias in PRO design, clinical trial accessibility, and treatment accessibility and scalability. So first challenge is demographic bias. So the demographics of nearly every long COVID study are overwhelmingly white, and that's because of lack of diversity among researchers in the field, including patient researchers, barriers to participation in research, and barriers to healthcare access and long COVID diagnosis and treatment. So if you go to clinicaltrials.gov and you search for completed drug trials for long COVID, there are 11 completed trials with results available. 9 of them report race, and 6 of these trials had 80% or more of white participants, and the remaining 3 are not much better off. So possible solutions for this, first, we need to fix the pipeline by addressing disparities in access to diagnosis and treatment. Marginalized patients are less likely to have long COVID awareness, receive a diagnosis, and thus have access to treatment, including clinical trial opportunities. So in the US, African Americans and Latinx communities are over 3 times more likely to have poor awareness of long COVID. And African Americans are underrepresented in EHR databases of individuals who received an official long COVID diagnosis. So possible solutions is to first leverage the expertise of marginalized patient researchers to diversify enrollment strategies. Select enrollment targets that correspond to the demographics of people affected by long COVID. Think intersectionality. Treatment effectiveness must be evaluated while controlling for crossover factors such as sex and race. And avoid reducing marginalized patient populations to lack of statistical power. Plan accordingly so that there is enough statistical power for group analysis. Second challenge is regional bias. So there is a lot of regional bias in the risk of long COVID. For example, high risk of long COVID in low-income countries and among Arab and North African populations. Higher burden of years lived with disability because of COVID-19 in sub-Saharan Africa, parts of South Asia, Eastern Europe, and some LMICs, for example, Kenya. Most studies are in patient populations from high and upper middle income countries. And the US and Europe produce and contribute the most to long COVID research and have the strongest collaborative ties in research. So we need to see multi-country clinical trials as a powerful opportunity for knowledge exchange and bidirectional capacity building in long COVID research. We need to leverage the expertise of researchers and patients from LMICs, design trials that can support collaboration among LMICs, and in every single clinical trial, we must report results by country. Do not fail to collect, report, and analyze race and ethnicity data by country. Third challenge is demographic and regional bias in PRO design. So the few patient-reported outcomes that are specific for long COVID have been developed and validated in patient population samples that are predominantly white white, and from a few high-income countries. And without dedicated effort and resources to develop, optimize, and validate patient-reported outcomes in diverse patient populations, we risk perpetuating health inequities and exacerbating health disparities. So some possible solutions to that is meaningful international collaboration involving researchers and patients from LMICs, linguistic and cross-cultural content validity of PROs developed, as well as psychometric performance evaluations of these PROs that control for social and environmental determinants of health. Fourth challenge is clinical trial accessibility. So participation in clinical trials are largely inaccessible for marginalized patient populations. And these barriers include underrepresentation of racialized and minoritized researchers conducting clinical trial research, inadequate funding for clinical trials in geographical areas serving minority and marginalized populations, low awareness and education among research staff about which underrepresented groups to target for recruitment, as well as lack of suboptimal strategies for reaching out to marginalized populations. So possible solutions are investment in career opportunities for racialized and minoritized researchers that must be addressed. Investment in training of patient advocates and clinical trial investigators for long COVID. Make it easy for patients to obtain documentation necessary to apply for paid time off and other protections during clinical trial participation. And address logistic barriers for participation, such as transportation and child care provision. Finally, treatment accessibility and scalability. So long COVID is a global public health crisis, and approved pharmacological treatments must be scalable and accessible to all patient populations around the world. And the ideal drug treatment for long COVID should have low cost to end consumer, be globally accessible, and be swiftly deployed and have high scalability. So possible solutions to address that are researching and trialing of repurposed drugs, because they involve lower cost and drug development from scratch, and they have a faster route to the market. We also need policies that prioritize and set designated funding to research and clinical trials, testing repurposed drugs, as well as funding opportunities for investigator-initiated clinical trial research. And that's why also initiatives like CureID are so important, because they investigate patient experiences with long COVID treatments using existing drugs. We are collaborating with the CureID team to analyze this data, and I invite every long COVID patient to submit your experiences with long COVID treatments. Thank you so much for listening.